We're four friends who live across the globe
and share a love of Bon Appétit's YouTube channel.
So we came together to bring you our thoughts on what BA serves up.
And try our hands at recreating their dishes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hi, it's LJ.
And it's me, Meg. And once again, Justine is not with us, but don't worry, she's behind the scenes. She'll be here more often than not. You guys know the drill by now, probably. So welcome back to another episode of Pod Appétit. And as always, we're going to start the episode talking about what we've been up to in our culinary worlds, what we've been cooking, what we've been eating. Amanda, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I, unsurprisingly, haven't cooked anything in the past week and a half. I've just been working a lot, so I haven't had as much time. But I did on Saturday go to some movies out and about, and I was at the movie theater and ran into my aunt and uncle randomly, and they took me for pizza at one of my favorite local pizza places, which is called Dewey's Pizza.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really good. I got a calzone because I'm not big on red sauce. It upsets my stomach. So I got a calzone, and it was really delicious. And the way they do it is it's just a base calzone, and then you get like toppings and then a little bit extra for extra toppings. So, and I love to get pine nuts and goat cheese in mine, and It's so good.
I can't think of calzones without thinking of Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
God, I haven't thought about that in months, years. That's a flashback. I even had to think like, what? And then I was like, oh yeah. I have been making lots of things, but the thing I wanted to talk about today is did you guys know that Delaney does a semi-regular, I think it's monthly, article series for Basically on the Bon Appétit website on Rent Week recipes?
Yes, I get the newsletters, and they're always sharing those in the newsletter.
Yeah, I noticed it, I think, from a newsletter first, and I kind of clicked through on one that I thought looked interesting, and I didn't realise that it was like a regular thing, mainly because I haven't paid rent for years, so I forgot that was a thing. But I guess I also pay a mortgage, so, you know, I guess it's a similar principle. But I was looking through some of the recipes, and they looked really interesting for me to be making on days when I work from home, because I'm always looking for like cheaper, easy ways to cook kind of lunch at home, and these Rent Week recipes just seemed something that was kind of super simple, not too expensive. So I tried out one of those, and the one I tried out, it was actually today, was the rice noodle crispy pork one that he made, which was, I think he wrote that about a year ago, so it's not a recent one, but it just involved browning some minced pork, and it was an interesting technique for browning it, because you put it all in a pan and you just sort of spread it out and leave it until you see that it's becoming crispy at the edges. Because my temptation with minced meat of some description, or ground meat of some description, is to kind of stir it until it's all browned. But he was like, no, you want it crispy, and to do that you don't move it, as we know. So you kind of had to leave it, and as it cooked and the fat kind of renders, it kind of congeals together, so it's like one big patty. So then you flip it once it looks crispy and do the same on the other side, and then you break it up after, and it really did make super crispy brown caramelized kind of minced pork at the end of it. So I was really impressed with that method, because I've never been able to get pork that crispy before. Then you take that out of the pan, then you fry up some chili, some garlic, some scallions, and then you put some soy sauce, some rice vinegar. He said use Szechuan peppercorns, and he did acknowledge the fact that that was a bit of a wanky ingredient to call for in a Rent Week recipe, but he said if you haven't got that, just use black pepper, which is what I did. Then you make your rice noodles. You just cook them like the packet says to cook them, and then you add the rice noodles, drain them, and add them back into the pan with all your aromatics, and then the pork, and like toss it, and then you can put some sesame seeds and kind of raw scallions on the top as a garnish, and it was really delicious. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't like fancy or complicated complicated. But I guess that's what you're looking for, right? In a Rent Week recipe. So I think I'm going to be trying some more of those. And it's a huge portion, so I had loads to like left over. So I'm going to take some to work tomorrow because I think it'll be nice cold as well. The only thing I would say is that the articles are written like an article and not like a recipe, which was irritating because it meant that I couldn't just see a list of ingredients. I had to read the whole thing to figure out what I needed.
That sounds really delicious. See, I really like this segment of our podcast because, LJ, I feel like you and I have a pretty similar palate. So anything you make that you love, I think to myself, that sounds good to me too. So it's like you're testing the recipes for me.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah. When I pick a recipe, I'm like, will Meg like this? I don't know. I better try it. Just to see.
I love Szechuan peppercorns. They are a bit hard to find, but if you can find them, I really recommend them because they have this very unique, almost tingly quality that you don't find in a lot of other ingredients that I actually really enjoy.
That's why he said it was worth trying to find them if you could, but he also said don't panic if you don't. You can just use black pepper. It's just a different dish, I guess.
But on that note of making what LJ makes, I made the Just Keeps Getting Better lentil salad again. I liked it so much. So
I actually did make that again last week as well.
Oh, so, did you? Yeah. So we both made it twice. So I think that means that it definitely gets the Pod Appétit stamp of approval.
Yeah, from half of us.
I feel like we need to have a little sound effect that's like boom, like a stamp right there.
Yeah, recommend.
I made another basically recipe, spicy, lightly pickled cucumbers. This is an Andy recipe. So this was just really simple. I like quick pickled cucumbers. So these are pickles that you can just make by letting them sit in the brine for a few hours. It's not a multi-stage jarring technique or anything like that. So it's just Persian cucumbers in my never-ending quest to make yay a measurement. They were about yay big.
Yay!
Also some rice vinegar, sugar, red pepper flakes, salt, dill, and lemon juice. And I added a couple of cloves of garlic, which weren't in the recipe, but I thought that they were a good addition. So yeah, they're pickles. Don't know what else to say about it. Liked the dill flavor, liked the lemon flavor. They were super easy to make and very tasty.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
All right, so moving on to recapping the videos. On the menu for today's episode, we have Pro Chef learns how to make a raindrop cake. Carla makes Thanksgiving stuffing on From the Test Kitchen. Pastry chef, I can't say pastry.
Funny.
Pastry chef attempts to make gourmet Takis on Gourmet Makes. Claire and Christina try to make the perfect Thanksgiving sides on Making Perfect Thanksgiving Episode 4. Brad makes a custom outdoor grill, Part 1, on It's Alive, Goin' Places. Professional chefs answer 14 common steak questions on Test Kitchen Talks. Priya makes garlic ginger chicken on From the Test Kitchen. And finally, Claire and Brad make the perfect Thanksgiving pies on Making Perfect Thanksgiving Episode 5. Whew, all right. So let's get started with Pro Chef learns how to make a raindrop cake.
Or, as Justine pointed out, boobs.
I thought they looked like boobs as well. Like those, those chicken fillets that you put in to like make your boobs look bigger. I thought they looked like those.
Yes!
Yes, they looked like breast implants for sure.
Also, I agree with Molly. These are not cake.
I agree as well.
Totally. But then I was like, but what is a cake? And I went down a bit of a spiral for a while. I'm not even sure I came up with an answer, but I just know that isn't it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to a bigger thing about this raindrop cake is that it just seems very gimmicky on the whole, both in name and substance. It seems like one of those Instagram-worthy, pretty desserts that are definitely style over substance.
Had you heard of a raindrop cake before this video?
No, I hadn't.
I had. I'd seen it on, I think, like Instagram or something. Like,
right, yeah.
But that's all. I had just like heard about it. I think I'd seen it, like somebody like cut into it one time and I was like, that doesn't look interesting to me, and just like moved on.
I agree. I hadn't heard of it at all and I didn't even know what it was. But as soon as it sort of was explained to me in the video, I was a bit kind of like, well, this is just been invented for the gram. It's not for like taste, or, you know, as in it's for aesthetic taste, not for like actual, you know, flavor taste. It kind of reminded me of, you know, like those other desserts, like freak shakes was one a few years ago, and like I've had a freak shake and it was like not something I would ever want to eat again. It's if you could probably Google it. It'll be on Instagram or something.
Oh, I should probably do that instead of wasting our time.
Yeah, but it's but they are just like, they look beautiful and pretty, but it's just so much dessert-based food shoved into a glass with some milkshake, and it's just like too much. Like you could never appreciate and eat on a regular basis, or if you do, I worry for your health. So yeah, like those kinds of things, and to me that's not like real food. I don't see that there's any kind of culinary skill in kind of learning that. But
well, it just to me looked like essentially just like Jello in a mold.
Yeah.
I feel bad because we keep like rooting for Molly, and then these videos keep coming out, and it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I feel like this series, as we've discussed, is still trying to
struggling.
Find its footing. It's still not really quite sure what it is. I saw someone online describe their interpretation of Molly Tries as, or at least their ideal interpretation is, an immersive learning experience in the way that Survival Cooking or the Iberico Ham episodes were. So I really agree with that person's take on the series, and I don't think that the Raindrop Cake fulfilled the immersive learning experience criteria. And ultimately, I was actually really glad that she sort of threw out the rule book. Whereas in the other episodes, she was really trying to listen to the expert. In this one, I was actually quite glad that she saw that this was kind of a dumb, gimmicky sugar water Jello dessert and said to herself, hey, I can improve on this. And even though the main thing about a raindrop cake is that it's this translucent drop of water, essentially.
Yeah.
I was totally fine that she said, you know what, I'm going to make this opaque, golden, quote, drop of infused toast water, which honestly sounded better to me than the original raindrop cake, even though it's so off the wall.
I was a bit worried about her going down a soggy, burnt bread water route, I'll be honest. But I imagine if it did taste how those people at the end said it tasted, like a peanut butter jelly sandwich, then I imagine she did a good job, because, you know, just soggy burnt bread water on its own sounded horrendous.
Yes.
Well, and that for me was my favorite part of this video, was her taking it to the streets and people actually trying it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right, Meg. I think that I'm glad that she broke out of that kind of, I have to do what this expert's telling me. But I think they were able to do that with this one, because that dude wasn't actually an expert. Like,
No.
he came in and she was like, so you're the inventor? And he was like, no, I just kind of realized it would work on Instagram. So it's like, okay, so there's no like provenance to this. No one's going to get offended if I like. Whereas if she'd been like, oh, I'm not going to cut this ham like this. I'm going to destroy thousands of years of tradition and just slice it with an axe, you know? Like, they'd be like, oh, you've disrespected my family.
It wasn't even like he originated the recipe. He was essentially just like appropriating it from overseas,
totally.
And was like, I think I can make a buck on this.
Yeah, to be honest, that guy's approach really annoyed me, especially since this video was essentially 20 minutes of SpawnCon, which I hate. And he gives Molly this kit. And if that wasn't even bad enough, the kit wasn't even plug and play. I couldn't believe that you had to abrade the molds in order to get them to work correctly.
Right?
That was so ridiculous to me. I'm like, you're charging people, let's say $50 for this dumb kit that you've slapped your raindrop branding on, and it's not even ready to go out of the box. I was so annoyed by that guy.
Yeah, that guy can go jump in a puddle of rain, as far as I'm concerned. But it was, it's funny that you said, Amanda, that you liked the talking with the strangers at the end. I felt like that was really like super awkward. She was like, here, look at this weird thing. And they were like, what's weird? That looks really weird. Why would I want to try it? She's like, no, trust me, try it. It's okay. And they'd be like, I guess. And I was just like, this is like Gourmet makes or reverse engineering plus awkward conversations with strangers. And I'm not sure how I feel about that.
The thing that made me uncomfortable about the man on the street interviews was just my germophobia popping up again. I had serious questions about how those spoons were being used and double dipping.
Well, it seemed like each set of people that she went up to, they had a new, they weren't like, oh, this guy ate one bite, now we're going to give you some stranger. It was like each raindrop cake, quote unquote, cake was given to one or two people at a time.
Not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, because she would have had to have made loads. I don't think she made loads, did she? I also liked everyone else's reactions, as in the other test kitchen editors' reactions to the concept of a raindrop cake, because Delaney was just like, what the fuck? No, thank you. And Chris, we found out he doesn't like peanut butter. I'm sorry, Chris. What? Peanut butter's delicious.
I was quite aghast at that.
I was aghast. Yeah. Whereas Andy seemed to like the entire concept. He seemed to think that clinical was hot, and he was really into that. He was tasting the peanut butter powder on the back of his hand. I felt like he was the most into it.
Yeah, the cameos were good in this episode.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Carla makes Thanksgiving stuffing.
Sponsored by Swanson.
Oh, I know. More sponsored content. Ah.
The sponsoring of this one didn't bother me.
It's also one of those things where I ask myself, is there any other brand of chicken stock? Do we actually have a choice as consumers? I feel like it's the only thing on the shelves.
We do in the UK, that's for sure. But yeah, we don't have Swanson here as far as I know. But, yeah.
I think I've only ever seen Swanson's and Kroger brand.
So do you guys think that this is in response to Chris and Rick's perfect stuffing? Or do you think they just wanted to give us as many stuffing recipes as possible? I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was just they wanted to do another Thanksgiving-themed stuffing episode. And I'm sure they were happy to take Swanson's money to do something.
I thought it was interesting that there was the tie-in with the Making Perfect episode, because this is the stuffing that Chris used as his base for that episode, the so-called Simple is Best stuffing by Victoria Granoff. I think another reason why they chose to make this video is that it seems like everyone in the test kitchen just loves this chef and loves this recipe. So I was happy that they wanted to share with their audience a recipe that they felt very strongly about.
I was very confused by the namings that we've got, because now we've got the perfect stuffing, and we also have the Simple is Best stuffing.
The best
and
stuffing.
I'm like, what the hell is going on? What do I choose? How do I choose? Ah!
Yeah, which superlative is the most superlativist?
Next, it'll be the perfect best simple stuffing or something. It'll combine them all together.
I thought this looked really tasty. I always really like Carla's descriptors of food. I think that she might be my favorite as far as painting a word picture for me. So she called it craggy, shaggy, coarse, rustic, custardy, bouncy, herby. Those are just a few of the words she used, and that really helps me imagine what it would be like to eat the recipe.
I'm really glad she explained the difference between stuffing and dressing, because that had been bugging me since they were talking about it in the Making Perfect episode, and I forgot to say about it when we discussed it. But I was like, they keep calling it a dressing. Isn't a dressing what you put on salad? I don't understand. Why is this called a dressing? Why isn't it stuffing? But yeah, it makes perfect sense now she's explained it.
Exactly. I really wish, though, that they had called it the Simon and Garfunkel stuffing or the Scarborough Fair stuffing.
Yeah. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
I love how into that she was every time.
Every time or every sage?
Oh.
I thought this looked delicious as well. It's interesting because if you'd asked, stuffing's a funny thing I'm learning. You guys have a different, I don't know what the word is, culture around stuffing than we do in the UK. Because I think if you ask someone what a classic stuffing would be in the UK, it would be very similar to this, but it would not be craggy and shaggy. It would be, the bread would be whizzed up into breadcrumbs. It would have a similar flavor profile with the onion and the garlic and those herbs, but then you'd also have like sausage meat with it as well. So that to me is what I would, if someone was like, oh, and there's stuffing, I would just assume that it's that sage and onion kind of sausagey stuffing.
Well, I think it's also kind of regional because it kind of depends. Like with the perfect stuffing that we covered last time, there was definitely that discussion of if there was sausage in it or not.
Yeah.
And like the type of bread. And honestly, for me, between the two stuffings, I think I would actually prefer somewhat of like a hybrid. I think largely this is the base, but then maybe add some sausage and cornbread instead of regular, just because I really like cornbread stuffing and cornbread is amazing. But it's just, I do think a lot of it's regional, like we saw in that where Rick had very strong feelings about what a stuffing should be and what his family did for stuffing.
I think I like, for Thanksgiving particularly, I prefer a cornbread stuffing just because if I make something that's closer to this, people will go, well, that's Christmas stuffing.
For me, I think that the simple is best recipe more closely approximates what I think of for Thanksgiving stuffing. About what you said, LJ, of the coarse torn bread, I don't think that is very traditional in America.
Okay.
I think it's usually the cubed bread. I think that that's most common for Thanksgiving stuffing. So I think that was one thing that made the test kitchen really gravitate to this recipe, is it had just that little bit different element, but also kept a lot of the classic ingredients. And at least in my family, the meat element in stuffing is almost always the turkey giblets instead of sausage.
Interesting. I feel like I've noticed that in America there's a lot more kind of regional variation, I guess because you guys have such a massive country. Than the, like,
What?
in the UK, you'd just be like sage and onions, like the classic flavor. Like most people would do that. But yeah, I like that there's more variation in America, definitely.
So are you guys corner piece people? I'm not. I'm a middle person. I really like the soft, squishy, gooey middle of just about anything. Brownies, stuffing.
See, our stuffing usually comes out more like a meatloaf, I suppose, than anything else. So I quite like the crispy corners on that. But I'd take stuffing which way.
For me, it depends on what it is. For stuffing, I think I'm probably more of a middle person. But for brownies, I'm all about that edge piece.
All
Living
about
on the
that
edge.
All about the edge. I'm on the edge.
About that edge, no middle.
Oh no, Amanda's
You
gone.
broke me, Meg.
I've broken Amanda. Moving on, pastry chef attempts to make gourmet Takis. So I made a prediction before this episode, which was that I think I'm the only one of us who has had Takis.
No Takis. I've never even heard of them. I'm Brad in this scenario.
My reasoning was, LJ, she's British. This is not only a very American thing, but it's a very regional American thing. And on that note, it's so regional that I don't think Amanda would have had the opportunity to have it. And
Wow.
I crossed
Correct.
out Justine because it's really spicy. And we know that Justine is not a spice person.
Okay, it took me all of my self-control not to respond to your message about that. I didn't save it for on air, like you said. And I was just like, oh, Meg called this hardcore.
So
Yeah.
speaking as the one and only person here who has had Takis, I really like Takis. I think they are like if Doritos and Hot Cheetos had a very spicy baby. So they're spicy, salty, crunchy, and I definitely had to go to the store and buy some after watching this
I really
video.
want some now.
I think you would really like them, LJ.
I think I would really like them. Well, when they said that it's a cousin of a Dorito, I was like, okay, I'm on board with this. I can do this.
Well, as soon as I saw it was like a rolled tortilla chip, I was like, oh, I'm so intrigued. Why have I never heard of these before?
Definitely specific to the Southwest American regions and Mexico, I would say.
Does that mean that you can't get them where you are, Amanda? They just don't sell them?
I have never seen them
How
like in any
interesting.
store anywhere in this area.
Yeah.
I honestly had never even heard about them until this video popped up last week. And I was at work and was getting like messages in our Slack about Takis. And I was like, what the fuck is Takis? I was actually wondering if it's something I can find like like on Amazon or something just to like try, because I'd really like to try them.
Probably. And I'd also recommend if you have a Mexican food specialty grocery store or anything like that, I bet that they would probably have Takis.
Oh, we do have a pretty large Mexican population in Columbus, so I should probably try to go to one of those stores. I know Jeremy loves to go there because they always have the best tacos.
Yeah. I really liked this video, and I thought it was a very successful framework of gourmet makes because it was an actual challenge. There were things she had to work through. It wasn't just super easy, but it wasn't so much of a challenge that she got overly frustrated and just felt like throwing in the towel. Justine called it a puzzle, which I think was a good way to describe it. So it was something that Claire could have fun solving and making.
Yeah, I agree.
I really enjoyed this one a lot. It was just kind of fun to see Claire not get too down on herself, but also not feel like it was phoning in or anything like that.
Yeah, although she's still always asking, like, but what if I nail it? Like now? What if this is just it? always hoping. I like that we got like two big interventions. One was from Rick. He got dialed in from Fire Island on his hashtag Summer of Rick. Yeah. And he was on his way to Mexico. He really had a great summer. I was following along on Instagram. It looked amazing. But she also got Rhoda when she was like coming in. And I was just like, Rhoda really is the test kitchen MVP. Like she just comes in and saves the day when everyone's at their lowest
wonderful.
moment.
I think that Delaney really helped in this episode too. Actually,
yes,
he was the first one to propose to her that she just do all of the coding post cooking / frying.
Yes, you're right.
And what you were saying, LJ, I really liked all of the test kitchen coming together to help her. And I like this so much more than her researching on the internet. She knew what everyone's strengths were and said, I'm going to call Rick. I'm going to ask Brad. I'm going to ask Delaney. And I think that that's way more engaging and satisfying than just doing cookbook research or internet research.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I want a show that's just like a buddy show of Claire and Rhoda supporting one another.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's so cute.
Just like being pals.
Totally.
I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but my favorite new-ish segment on Gourmet Makes is when Claire tries to remove all the snacks from her workstation in one fell swoop.
Yeah, why does she do that in one go? Like, it's not necessary. The bench is right there. You could just make 2 trips.
Maybe that's her competitive nature. She feels like she has to get it done in one.
It's a challenge.
So funny. I like that we got Brad's powders involved in this.
Me too.
Yes.
This recipe as well. The dehydrated kimchi powder.
And he let Claire touch the new dehydrator.
Yeah, the new dehydrator. I'm like, finally, she gets to have a turn. I have to say, though, I was really concerned that apparently Brad, Chris, Carla and Claire all need orthopedic help. I was like, what is happening in that test kitchen? What are they doing to each other?
All day.
That's true. They are on their feet all day. I like how they addressed a viewer comment asking whether they would release an episode that was outtakes, to which they replied that Gourmet Makes pretty much is entirely outtakes.
Well, yeah. Like, they even kept in all the stuff about where she made Gabby a vermouth.
Yes.
Oh my God, that was so fantastic.
Just like, oh, I've not done anything for the last hour because I've been making drinks for people. It does make me feel like the test kitchen is like an amazing place to work if you can just have a vermouth in the middle of the day because you feel like it.
Exactly. All right, our next video is Claire and Christina try to make the perfect Thanksgiving sides.
LJ, I know you have strong feelings about this.
Yeah, I was really apprehensive going into this video, and I'm sorry to report that I'm really angry about what happened here, because nobody wants a salad. Like, why is salad on that Thanksgiving table? Look, I'm sure it's a great salad. It looked like a great salad. I would eat it all fall and winter, but it does not belong on my Thanksgiving menu, let alone what is purported to be the perfect Thanksgiving menu. So I'm outraged that this got through the net. Like, how? And it all happened so quickly. Like, it happened way too quickly. There's so many sides like possible avenues to go down. And we just got like a 10-second conversation where they were like, who was it who said that they didn't want lettuce, and then they all ignored him, and that was it. It was Chris. He was like, I don't want lettuce, and they were like, never mind, we're making a salad. And then they landed on Brussels, and to me, I'm anti-Brussels at a Thanksgiving table because Brussels sprouts in the UK is very, very associated with Christmas dinner, so that's the reason why I wouldn't have it at Thanksgiving. Plus, I don't really like them, but I think that's more to do with how people prepare them over here. But anyway, I feel like we've missed the decision process on why you landed on these two avenues. I feel like you didn't explore enough other options because there's so many other options. Like, what's wrong with green bean casserole? What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Or sweet potatoes or yams. Andy also threw that into the ring, and they also all ignored him immediately.
So I was like, this is fucked from the start. They've ruined it from the start, and I'm really mad about it.
Okay, so we typically do have a salad on our Thanksgiving table. However, it's usually just because my mom feels like we should have salad. To me, I agree that I don't think of like salad as part of like, yeah, sure, you want a balanced meal, but with Thanksgiving, part of that is like all the other greens that you can have in various ways. And it usually has more to do with like roasting vegetables. You know,
LJ's shaking her head, listeners.
Thanksgiving is not the day for balance. I'm sorry. It's the one day when balance can go fuck itself.
Like, sure, okay, I guess it's not like I actually follow that on Thanksgiving. I'm all about like pie and rolls and cranberry sauce, as we've discussed. I have strong feelings about cranberry sauce, but like you said, LJ, there are so many other things. Green bean casserole. I'm surprised there wasn't some sort of like corn or broccoli brought up.
Yeah.
The yams and the sweet potatoes, like Andy said, that is very classic Thanksgiving. I don't think I have ever been to any Thanksgiving dinner anywhere, like at any relative's house. Even like at one time, my grandparents got us reservations at a restaurant on Thanksgiving because that's what everyone wants to do on Thanksgiving, you weirdos. They're dead. It's okay. Even there were sweet potatoes. There's always some kind of like yam or sweet potato. Even if it's not my favorite thing because I find them a little too sweet, it's just like part of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is like the equivalent of the toppings episode in the first season of Making Perfect because there's so many, you know, there's infinite number of toppings you could put on a pizza, just like there's almost an infinite amount of sides you can put on a Thanksgiving table. Yeah. So I get it that it's a big task and it's difficult, so you kind of have to pick your lane. But I feel like with the toppings episode, they at least had like 3 or 4 different flavor profile avenues to explore first before narrowing down. And they didn't do that here. And that's what pissed me off.
That felt like it was more organized to try different things and slowly narrow down. Whereas this didn't feel, I mean, sure, they narrowed down once they hit on salad and Brussels, but it didn't feel like there was a large enough, I don't know, top of the pyramid before it goes down.
I agree. I think that it didn't really showcase the honing and fine-tuning of the recipe that we've sort of come to expect from other Making Perfect, both on the macro level, like you said, LJ, of not even discussing other sides really, and also, as you were saying, Amanda, on the micro level of let's compare, say, cornbread versus sourdough bread. And it was actually a little... not confusing, that's not the right word, but it didn't really pay off for me as the viewer because sometimes they would introduce elements in the decision tree as they were being eliminated. They weren't even introduced before that. So I was like, kabocha, bacon, those were options? I didn't even know those were options that they were considering until they eliminated them. So it didn't quite work narratively either.
I feel like that's an editing issue. Because clearly Claire and Christina had discussed it.
Sure.
Because then they went, oh, we don't need a meat. And I was the same as you, like, wait, what meat? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely an editing thing. Yeah. And I don't know if they thought, oh, it's sides, it can't be more than like a little over 30 minutes. But sides is a lot of Thanksgiving, so...
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that annoyed me about this episode was they have made a big deal all the way through the season about it being something that's accessible to the cook, and they had really bonkers logic that lots of people pointed out in the comments of the YouTube video, that they were like, oh no, we can't choose this fancy vinegar for the dressing because no one will be able to get their hands on it, yet they decided that the recipe had to have a very specific type of squash that nobody can get their hands on.
An experimental genetically modified X-Men squash that literally no one can find.
The logic was just bonkers. It was all over the place, and I just couldn't follow it. And I just thought, if I went to someone's house for Thanksgiving and you put that salad down on the table, I would throw it across the room, because that is not Thanksgiving.
Yeah, not to be totally down on this video, but I guess we're gonna be. I was expecting to like the Christina and Claire pairing a lot more than I did, whereas actually it made me a little bit uncomfortable for Christina. Christina at one point said, Claire dictates and I follow. That's how she described their partnership. And not gonna lie, I really felt that vibe throughout the whole episode. Christina was often silent. She wouldn't say anything. Claire would say, let's do this, not do that, let's say this. And Christina just sort of followed along. So it wasn't the best team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I got that vibe as well. It was sad to see, because I've been a bit psyched for it as well.
I think they get along better in Gourmet Makes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I think the difference there is Christina isn't giving recipe advice. She's there to support Claire. And so I think maybe that's the dynamic Claire is used to with the two of them, is that Christina is there as a supporter for her instead of as somebody else that she is discussing recipes with and going like toe to toe with.
Instead of a partner. That's a good point.
The other thing that was kind of irritated me a bit is the recipe that they came out that they thought was the best recipe for Brussels sprouts was something that Molly had made up before, and then it was just this really, it was hilarious, but then it was just this really contrived segment of being like, well, we can't have that because it's Molly's recipe and we're meant to have come up with a recipe, so we've got to come up with something different. So they did, but I was just kind of like, but if you've developed that and you think that's the best recipe, maybe that's just the best recipe. We've got something different for making perfect. And it's just like, it just felt really contrived and annoying that they had to develop something different, even though they were basically agreed that Molly had nailed it like the year before.
I agree. I think that anyone watching this video, their takeaway is going to be, I should make that honey chili recipe. Yeah. No one's gonna watch this video and think, I'm gonna make that date molasses one that they came up with at the last minute.
Right.
That's when they should have gone, never mind, let's go with green beans.
Yeah, exactly. If they, at the end of this, I came away thinking, if they fuck up pie, I'm going to be so mad.
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. We should move on to Brad Makes a Custom Outdoor Grill, Part 1 of It's Live Going Places.
Sponsored by a car? Question mark?
Don't get me started.
That was so shoehorned. I just thought, I'm on board. Like, I get it. Like, they need to earn money. Like, hardly anyone's subscribing to print anymore. Like, it's bad. So they need to earn money and get new revenue streams. I get it. We've taken the piss out of it before, but I don't actually have a problem with sponsorship in principle. It's just, it needs to make sense. And to me, like, a car sponsoring them doesn't make sense. They're a food magazine.
So Swanson's makes sense in that way.
Yeah.
That it is food related. Or even some of the other ones, like the various like vodka or wine or whatnot. Like, sure, that's
totally.
like a pairing you put with food. But yeah, a car?
Yeah, that really jarred for me. I wasn't happy about that.
I thought this was a really fun episode. This Jimmy DiResta guy just feels like Brad's soulmate. I love how they got on like a house on fire. They were just such a fun pairing to watch. At one point, the descriptor calls them the tri-state guys. It seems like they could have their own little spin-off show. But I really appreciated Jimmy's personality. I thought that it meshed really well with Brad. I thought it was so cute when Brad said they weren't having pizza and Jimmy said, no pizza.
Yeah, Brad had listed a load of vegetables and he was like, what?
Pizza? So I hope in part 2, Brad makes some pizza for Jimmy.
I hope so too.
You should be able to make like a flatbread for him or something.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. I also think that welding is really cool. I got to do just the tiniest bit of welding in middle school in shop class. So it's fun to watch. It's fun to do. I felt this was a very satisfying, almost soothing video in a way. And that plasma cutter was so badass. I saw, I think probably in the thumbnail preview, the finished logo on the grill. And I thought to myself, wow, how do they do that? And then they showed me this amazing plasma cutter. That was so cool.
I have to say, I didn't enjoy this video as much as I have done other It's Alives where they focus on more like actual food preparation. Just because that's why I come to Bon Appétit for the most part. I love food and I love making food, and that's what I'm trying to learn about. I'm never going to make my own grill. I'm just
No.
So learning about it, like I love the dynamic. I love watching Brad, but I was just kind of a bit like, I wish you were doing this over cooking some food. Like that was all I was doing. But that's what part 2 is going to be, so fine.
I agree. I enjoyed this episode, but it definitely is not among my top most favorite It's Alives.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one, though I'm very sorry, Meg. After they, like, the first part of them doing welding, I'm like, okay, cool. But then once they basically, like, cut all the parts and there was just a montage of them, like, putting everything together welding, I kind of got a little bit bored.
Yeah.
I do
would
think
agree.
it was a little overlong. I think
Yeah.
they could have cut a minute or two. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the MVP of this video was Hunzi and his editing at the end.
Yes,
Of, like,
the technical college.
Oh my
Technical
gosh.
college.
That was my favourite bit of
Yes.
the entire video. They should have made that video.
Oh, wouldn't that have been great if the whole video was a fake promo for a fake technical college?
That would have been genius, and I would have loved that. That would have been my favourite.
But don't worry, there's no English class.
Oh my god, that bit where they're just basically talking in, well, they called it like Brad language.
New
They're
York
just making,
gibberish.
like, gibberish.
New
Yeah,
Jersey
yeah.
gibberish.
Like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it was just hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing, and the fact that they just understood each other as well.
Oh, I thought it was so funny that at one point Brad said that he understood sound effects, and I thought, I can believe it. He doesn't speak English, but he does speak sound effects.
I also enjoyed their weighing competition.
Yeah.
Especially the bit where Brad says, "Leave in the comments by the gram how much you think it weighs," and then he guessed the weight in pounds. I was like, which system are you using, buddy? Pick one.
I feel like that was him trying to be like, oh, they're telling us to do grams more. And so he was like trying, but that's not how his brain works.
And grams for 20-something pounds is going to be a lot of grams. So I don't think they ever revealed how much the metal brick weighed. I was going to guess 24 pounds.
Oh, yeah, no, they
Yeah,
didn't.
I don't think they did either.
Yeah.
I wonder if that really is going to be a thing where somebody wins a prize. From the
I should tweet it or something.
It was quite funny how Brad was saying it, and you could see he was looking at whoever was behind the camera to be like, yeah, is that going to happen? If I say it, can it happen? It was like,
Can we do it?
You've not got permission for this, but you're just saying it anyway.
Someone follow up on that.
Oh, one thing I thought was funny was the beginning when he was drawing it. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a cool, like, drawing so you all know what you're headed for. But they were like, and this is our plan. And I was like, that's not a plan. That's a doodle. But sure. But maybe it is a plan in New Jersey. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's the plan in the way that, like, a design sketch, like if you're watching Project Runway, they sketch something and that's technically their plan.
But then you have to, like, make the blueprint, right? Well, they didn't. Obviously, it worked out.
Obviously.
But yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next video. Professional chefs answer 14 common steak questions. We've got some new pairings. We've got some new people.
Yeah, I liked this one.
Yeah, I thought the pairings were really good, changed up. I think they they worked so well together in a way that some of the others didn't. I especially actually really liked Delaney and Brad's vibe together. That was good.
Yes.
And
definitely.
Sola and Rick as well. I thought they were.
I liked Sola and Rick a
Yeah.
lot.
It felt like Sola isn't afraid to speak against Rick's ideas.
I liked their dynamic a lot for that reason. They disagreed on pretty much everything, but they kept it really nice. And not only that, but they showed genuine curiosity in the other's opinion and preferences. They really seemed to want to get to the bottom of why they liked it that way. And they explicitly asked each other things like, explain it to me or tell me why. So I really appreciated that. Although at one point Sola did say, stop yelling at me, Rick. But she was obviously kidding. So I felt like that was a really good pair. I liked them a lot.
I thought it was funny that you could tell that Brad was just annoyed by all of these questions. Like, he wasn't like, not annoyed in the way that he was like, oh, I shouldn't even be here. But he was just a bit like, why are people asking these questions? Like, surely it's just common sense. And he was like, I forgot. And every time a new question pops up, he was like, ah.
I also liked how he and Delaney were like, of course, we'd never overcook our steaks, but to answer the question.
Well, everyone was annoyed about the question about how long you should cook a steak, like the first question, weren't they? Because it's true, like you can't give an answer.
There's no one answer.
I don't even know that much about steak, as we have covered on this show, but even I know, like, you can't just be like, it takes this long, because it depends on so many different factors.
Yeah, mainly how big it is and how thick it is.
Which is a huge factor. Something I really like about Test Kitchen Talks is that it's really interesting to see A, where everyone agrees, and B, where everyone diverges. So I think on the one hand, it really illustrates that you have to discover what works for you when you're cooking, what your own preferences are, and that's just through trial and error. And on the other hand, I think it also shows that though there may not be one right answer, sometimes there is a wrong answer.
Yes, exactly.
I liked when it was something about getting it, having it well done, and Emil's solution was to get better taste.
Yeah, get better taste. And like they were like, why? And I think was it Rick said because it's gross.
Yeah.
I'm so
I
with him.
That Molly and Carla said, well, you can like whatever you like. We're not going to judge you.
You do you, yeah. And if I was going to bet on one of the pairings to say that, it would have been those two.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Emil and Claire were a good pairing too. I feel like they're kind of similar. They both seem very technically or scientifically minded, so they both seem to approach the questions from pretty much the same angle. They seem to be in agreement a lot.
Yes.
Well, when it came to reheating the steak, they seemed to, I mean, I don't know if everybody got it, but they had like 4 different kinds that they were tasting, and instead of just going, oh, do this, they were like, well, let's compare all of these different kinds of reheated steak versus cold.
And then they were like, yeah, don't reheat a steak. Have it cold.
Poor Emil. Do you think he was having flashbacks to 43 Ways to Cook a Steak, or do you think this was before that?
Yeah.
Either way, he's had a lot of steak to eat.
I think he's had enough steak. Someone stop feeding him steak.
I also felt very vindicated by the question that said they suspected that sealing in the juices was bullshit, which is something I always suspected as well. So I was very happy to see that was a, quote, old chef's tale.
It always sounded a bit questionable because you can't, like they said, you can't physically like laminate a steak when you cook it. Like it's not going to happen. Nor should you want to, you know, because you want the juices to kind of like expel, cook, and then you let it rest. That's the important thing, because that's where the juices all get kind of sucked back in as it rests. I also liked that they clarified why grass-fed steak is better, because I think that's an important distinction that not enough people pay attention to sometimes. But I did enjoy that the person who asked the question said that they were told by someone who looked like an Amish guy, and then
Amish adjacent.
Amish adjacent. Yeah, and Carla was just like, don't bring people's Amishness into it. And the little pop-up box, be respectful.
I really love all the little pop-up boxes in these Test Kitchen Talks. I feel like they add a little spice of humor in there for fun.
Next video up is Priya makes garlic ginger chicken.
Oh my god, I loved this
with
so
a
much.
side of Chicago.
So I feel like Priya so much because I one time was at summer camp and we were listening to the Chicago soundtrack and I was singing along, and my friend's older sister turned to me and said, I don't mind if you sing along, Amanda, but could you maybe not sing along to all of the instruments?
The instruments. That's so funny.
And like 16-year-old me was mortified.
Oh, Amanda, you should have hung out with me and my sister. We always used to sing along to everything. The instruments, the percussion, like all the things.
Yeah. Oh, when she said she knows the entirety of Chicago, I was like, yes, me too.
I loved
This
it.
really spoke to me too, because I used to work at a movie theater, and at the time Chicago was in theaters, and I got to hear the medley every time I cleaned up the theater, and I would sing and I'd dance, and it was great. So Priya is my hero.
I just love Priya so much. That was my main takeaway from this video.
She is so delightful. I really loved this video.
I also thought that the actual food was amazing too. Like,
Yes.
I am in
Yes.
the camp previously where I was like, if you're buying chicken, buy like a thigh or buy like a whole chicken. Like, don't buy a skinless, boneless chicken breast. Who wants that? That's like the worst of all chickens. But actually, I can see how this method, which I'd never really heard of before, could produce something that was really nice and succulent.
I thought this recipe sounded great too. I am mostly in the chicken breast camp, although I am starting to like thighs more and more and making thighs more often, but I'm still someone who is pro chicken breast. I thought it was funny that Priya sort of nervously looked over her shoulder before she started talking about how much she liked chicken breast, just because she knows that the rest of the test kitchen would give her grief about it.
Yeah, when she started, I was just a bit, kind of sat back and I was like, okay, Priya, sell boneless chicken skin breast. No, I'm going to say that again. I sat back.
Chickenless, skinless bones.
No. What? When she started talking, I sat back in my chair and I was like, okay, Priya, sell boneless, skinless chicken breasts to me. I bet you can't. But she did. She totally did.
Those are great moments in Bon Appetit, being proved wrong as a viewer or
Yes,
diner.
definitely. I am 100% a boneless, skinless chicken breast kind of girl. So I was like, yes, finally.
I thought it was really funny that Priya would giggle when she said breasts.
Yes. Because she just kept saying it when she didn't even need to. She could have said like, oh, the chicken. But she was like, the breasts.
And then she was massaging them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really liked about this recipe is how simple it was as well. Like, it wasn't complicated. It didn't involve a ton of like weird ingredients or anything like that, or difficult to find ingredients. It was just really, really easy.
Yeah.
And I could imagine like most people feeling confident enough to make this, but maybe I'm not the best judge of that. I think we refer to our novice correspondent, Amanda, for that question.
I mean, I may be considering this recipe for a side dish at some point.
Oh,
nice.
yeah. I think you could totally, because it's just like you do the thing in the bag, then you put it in a pot, and it's like, don't peek at it. Like, how's that difficult?
Very hands off.
Yeah, which I did like where she was like, right about now, you want to look at the chicken, but don't.
Don't look at the chicken.
Because that's totally what I would do. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh, I should go look at this and check on it. And my husband is like, no, because you'll let all the heat out. And I'm like, oh,
totally.
damn it.
Totally.
Another reason I like this episode is that it's such a huge meme in the Bon Appetit fandom that Priya always FaceTimes her family.
Yes.
But there hasn't been
loved
a
it.
Priya episode since we've started the podcast in which she FaceTimed her family. So this is actually the first time we've seen it for the podcast.
I loved it. And I love that it was like her aunt and that her whole family was in Norway. And they just all seem to love each other so much. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
I want to go on a Priya family holiday to Norway. That sounds amazing.
So I guess we have to thank Sonia Mommy for the recipe instead of Priya, right?
Yeah. Also, we got some reinforced learning on Indian words for things. So Dakkan came back, the lid. And I learned about a new spice, amchur, which I never knew about before.
I didn't know about that one either.
I just said that this looked really simple with really easy to get ingredients. And I just realized I don't know how easy to get amchur is, but
Well, since she said she would substitute that for lemon or lime, maybe it goes both ways.
yeah, I hope so.
I just want to be best friends with Priya.
Let's all sing Chicago together with her.
When you're good to mama. Oh God!
Good
Things just
team.
fell off my table. I jazz handed too hard.
And I saw she had tweeted recently about her recipe book is up for the Goodreads, like best recipe books of the year.
Indian-ish.
So people should go vote for her.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Priya for president.
Priya for president.
Ah, we just did the same thing. Jinx again.
Was that Frozen? Yeah.
Yeah. Was that Frozen? Come on.
I didn't get Disney Plus to not watch Frozen.
But you know what shouldn't be frozen? Your chicken breasts before you start cooking them. Make sure they're fully defrosted.
All right, we've gone off track. For our final video, we have Claire and Brad make the perfect Thanksgiving pies. So I've never related so hard to Brad and Claire at different moments in this video. So Brad for his extreme, all-encompassing love of pumpkin pie. This is me. I also love pumpkin pie. He says he eats too much of it. I know, LJ, that you love pumpkin pie too.
Yes. I think I didn't have it growing up, so I've had to try and catch up on all the childhood pie that I missed out on. But I think if I had it as a kid, I would have definitely been that person, that Brad, who was who ate all the pie? Who ate the half the pie
sneaking
before
bits
I
of
brought it
pie
out?
from the fridge. Yeah.
Whoops.
I would also definitely pick pumpkin pie out of the so-called trifecta of apple, pecan, and pumpkin. And the moment where I felt the most like Claire was her hyper competitiveness. This is also me.
Yes.
The way she got so nervous and flustered in the time crunch and how she's in it to win it and how she cannot abide a B-. She has to have that A+. This is definitely me.
That was so funny. That bit where Brad was really excited and they added up their score that they'd self-scored themselves as, and Brad was like, 81.5, and Claire had the exact opposite reaction at him reading out the score, because she was like, that's a B-, and he was like, yeah, great, I've always a C student, and she's like crying. So funny.
Oh yeah, I related to Claire there, where she's like, but that's a lot worse than I did in school. Yes, Claire, yeah.
So funny. And the other thing that really made me laugh, not like I can breathe, was the bit where they're prepping the pies in the test kitchen and Brad was doing the crimping and he started sniffing it and Claire just ran up and just stopped. There was that screech sound effect.
Tire screech sound.
And just her face. Oh God, it was so funny. I can't. It was hilarious. But I just know that feeling so well when you're working with someone and they've just really fucked something up and you're like, what the fuck are you doing?
This video really highlighted their odd couple dynamic, their sort of opposites attract dynamic, especially in that pie crust snipping moment. And Brad said, I want it to do weird things. And Claire said, I don't want it to do weird things. That's the difference between us. That kind of was them in a nutshell.
But what I like about them is that they're so different, right? They just approach things in exactly the opposite ways. And sometimes that leads to clashes, but more often than not, they actually balance each other out and complement each other quite well. And also that neither one of them, I think, feels like you know how when you have the pairings in test kitchen talks and you feel like one person really dominates and asserts their opinion and the other one becomes more kind of meek and the kind of fades into the background. I feel like although Claire is obviously the leader in terms of in their cooking dynamic, Brad very much asserts his opinion, and when he doesn't want to listen to Claire, he won't listen to Claire. Do you know what I mean? He's not afraid of her. He's not afraid of them. They've both got quite an equal dynamic in that regard, I think, and they respect each other's opinions.
I agree with that assessment for the most part. I would never describe Brad as meek, certainly not. So you're absolutely right. He doesn't let Claire step over him in that way at all. I do feel like sometimes he will go along just because it seems like the path of least resistance. I think he definitely picks his battles. Yes. There are for sure moments where he says, I'm going to do it this way regardless of what Claire wants. But I do think there were a couple moments where he just sort of went with the flow instead of choosing to disagree.
I think that shows that he is both married and a father. So he knows how to just go with the flow sometimes.
How did you feel about the conceit of this pie competition?
I at least really liked that they had Rhoda break it to Claire. And she said, they chose me because you won't get mad at me. And she was like, I won't get mad at you. Which just supports my idea of a buddy show where Claire and Rhoda support each other.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
About the pie contest, this definitely took over the episode, which was really quite enjoyable for me from an entertainment standpoint.
Yes.
I do feel like it diverged from the Making Perfect framework, which was honestly fine with me because it was an entertaining episode. We got to see Brad and Claire being silly. And I feel like most people can relate to this sort of state fair competition or have entered something similar. So it was pretty fun to see Brad and Claire in that situation, and especially their reaction to losing. It was like the 5 stages of pie grief. They were in disbelief, and then they were bargaining, and then they just accepted it.
I wonder why they threw that in there. My suspicion is it's because they knew they were going to fairly easily nail like an amazing pie recipe because it's Claire and she's made a million pumpkin pies. She
Right.
knows what works. And what they came up with was like exactly what I was hoping, because it's like the best bits of the pies that you want on the table, right? So I felt like that was why they were like, well, that's going to be boring if they do that. We need to throw them into like some kind of weird situation where they have to deal with that. I didn't mind that at all. I didn't mind, like you, Meg, I didn't mind that it kind of took away from the point of the episode, which was meant to be developing the pie recipe, because I feel like that was kind of a no-brainer. The bit that did get on my nerves, and maybe that's just because I lived in New York, have I mentioned that? I don't think I have, is that they kept counting down the time to get to the airport. And what can you guys tell me? I didn't take that many domestic flights when I was out there. What time do you have to get to the airport before your flight?
You're supposed to be there 2 hours beforehand.
Yeah.
I think it depends on who you ask. I always get there an hour before boarding starts, so it's usually 2 hours before.
So I figured like that would be what they were aiming for, and it depends what that timer was tracking. Was that timer tracking down when they were supposed to leave, or was it when the flight was supposed to leave? Because if it was
I had that question too, because if it were the countdown until the flight lifts off, that is not enough time.
I was like,
I was getting very nervous for them.
They are getting from downtown Manhattan to any of the New York airports. I've been to all of them, and they all take at least an hour to get there. I was like, it's not happening. Like,
oh, that's a good point, because I thought it was to when the plane takes off, and also, did they have everything packed? That's instantly where my anxiety was, is I was like, oh no, do they have everything packed?
Yeah.
How are they going to transport these pies and nothing falls out? What's going on? Shouldn't they have baked these pies in Colorado instead, so they're fresher?
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of transporting pies, I think that they need to give Claire an out-of-test kitchen experience that's actually fun for her, like Italy was for Molly and Carla. I think that making her haul a delicate dessert cross-country to compete in a pie competition is not what the commentators had in mind for, let's get Claire something nice, a nice little trip.
Yeah, it was very anxiety-inducing. But Brad cheered her up at the end because he was like, you know, we came to a fruit competition with a pumpkin pie. Of course we weren't going to win. I think that kind of made us feel a bit
speaking
better.
of fruit pies, I have a question. I think I misunderstood at the beginning when they were talking, like when they had the round table and were talking about the pies. They said the thing about like, how many pies are you going to bring to Thanksgiving? Claire's instant thing was like, well, you always do pumpkin, apple, and pecan. And I'll be the outlier. Pecan is my favorite pie. But I thought they were going to do some sort of apple pie also. Like, I thought it was going to be they go and do the pie contest, but then they still have to figure out, like, an apple pie or another pie for Thanksgiving instead of just one Thanksgiving pie.
Oh.
So that definitely threw me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was their hypothetical brainstorm.
Yeah.
Remember, guys, losers don't get turkey legs.
No, they don't. Can I just say, though, to sum up, I am so, like, it's been a bit hit and miss, some of the Making Perfect episodes, but I'm so jazzed for bringing it all together. I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm interested to hear people's strong opinions about what other people put together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
All right, so that's our batch of videos for this episode. So now that we've recapped them all, we're going to talk about what our favorite video was and what dish we would make from this batch of videos. LJ, you want to start?
No, because I just forgotten to check what I want.
All right, I'll start.
Sorry.
My favorite video was the one we just talked about. Claire and Brad make the perfect Thanksgiving pies for all the reasons we just outlined. And I think the recipe I would be most likely to make is Priya's garlic ginger chicken. It looks easy. It looks delicious. I tend to make savory foods more often than sweets, although that hasn't really been borne out in Pod Appétit so far. But yeah, I would want to make that chicken. Amanda?
I am exactly the same. I honestly, like, yesterday, I was like, oh, okay, Priya is going to be both my favorite and the thing I would make. And then I watched the pie episode last night before bed, and I was like, well, Priya still gets me wanting to make her chicken, but now the pie wins.
Right at the finish line.
I'm exactly the same then. Is this the first time we've all been the same? Like,
Whoa.
I love the
think
pie episode,
so.
and I'd probably make the pie, but I think more likely I would end up making the garlic ginger chicken.
Yeah, pie was a close second for me. So I think that segues nicely into a new thing we're doing on Twitter, our BA recap draft. Every episode, we tell you what our favorite video of the batch was, but we want to know what your favorite video of the batch was as well. So we kicked this off last episode. On Twitter, we're running Twitter polls that are a showdown between the videos we've recapped, and one video will reign victorious. So last time, Chris's recreation of the trash can nachos took home the crown.
Woohoo!
So be sure to go to Twitter. You can find us at pod_appétit. Look for hashtag BA recap draft and cast your vote for your favorite videos. And also just big thanks to LJ for spearheading this.
Yeah, it was really fun. We had to have an emergency tiebreak vote for the first one.
We did.
Because the votes between It's Alive Ginger Beer and the Trash Can Nachos were like exactly the same. So we had to have an emergency tiebreak, but Chris eventually won. And well deserved, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, Justine was very happy about that win.
Yeah, she backed him all the way through.
I wanted to thank Drunk Dish Podcasts, Margaret, and Chris Morocco's Spoons for chiming in on the draft. And we want to hear from you too. And thanks to everyone who voted. So be sure to check that out. Which moves us along to our shout outs in general. So we're in the very lucky position of having so many great comments that we can't possibly shout all of them out here. But do know that we want to thank you all, and that even if we don't shout you out this time, we do read and enjoy every single comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we share them with each other all the time.
Oh, yes,
so
we do.
we're talking about it between us, even if we can't get it on the podcast.
Exactly. We had a lot of people chime in on our last recap episode, thanks to my mom, Mary, Hare Saffitz, Out of Context, Brad Leone, Sunny from the Book of Lies podcast, Jaslyn from Up in 10 Club, Mrs. Casper, and Heidi from Vibrant Visionaries. Heidi also told us what she was making that week to answer our question of what are you guys making. The Cult of Domesticity podcast also chimed in with their food they were making for the week. And then we had some listeners for Amanda Makes Carla's Banana Bread. Thanks to Erica from Les Represent for listening and commenting. She also said that she has been inspired by Pod Appétit to make vegan mac and cheese, which was a big hit in her household.
Sounds delicious.
So we would love to hear that.
Yeah.
Mandy K from Pop Culturally Deprived podcast was inspired by Gourmet Makes to try Pocky for the very first time. So she shared that with us on Twitter. There are a couple of Twitter friends who, like us, really enjoyed Priya's garlic chicken. So at Waterfalls, great username, made this recipe over couscous and broccoli.
Oh, yeah.
And at That's Spinach, whose handle is Release the Allison. You guys have great names. Also loved Priya's video, said it was one of their recent favorites and that she's a treasure, which obviously we all agree with.
Yes.
She's a sweet baby angel.
And finally, thanks to at Ilram, ILRAM07, for commiserating with us when they dropped Takis instead of Mentos and pulled a fast one on us.
Those jerks.
And finally, thanks to Alana Nana, sorry about that, who said she was honestly kind of mad that we didn't go with Bon Appétit. And you know what? I have to agree a little bit. Missed opportunity.
But then we wouldn't be pals, Meg. You didn't think of that. We wouldn't be pals.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. So thank you so much to everyone who has reached out to us. We really appreciate it. And we wanted to share a recent review. This is a 5-star review titled Fun with Cooking. And this comes from Jasbean of Her American Story podcast. Jasbean writes, I love to cook and definitely enjoyed both listening to the process of making the recipes and the analysis afterwards. I also loved the multiple hosts. Definitely adds depth to the show and interesting perspectives on the recipes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And be sure to tune in just a few days. On our next episode, we'll have another holiday special. Be sure to tune in for Pod Appétit's Thanksgiving potluck, where we'll be revealing Bon Appétit recipes we've made in secret for our very own virtual Thanksgiving dinner. It's a good one.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit, a Bon Appétit fan cast.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Until next time, the test kitchen is closed.
Hey, this is Liz,
Hey, this is Heather,
and we are Nerdy Bitches Podcast.
a show where two geeky ladies podcast their way through pop culture.
From movies and TV to our regular book club and everything in between, we bring you our favorite fandoms with a feminine eye.
We are talking Star Wars, Star Trek, DC, Marvel, comic books, and anime.
And don't forget sci-fi, fantasy, action movies, video games, D&D, board games, and so much more.
Be sure to check us out on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, or wherever you find awesome podcasts.
You can also find us hanging out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and at nerdybitches.com.
See you soon.